Well, I feel like I should just leave after my introduction because I think that peaked. We're just gonna go downhill from there. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be back in Georgia after burying the Boston weather. My family is here today with their 20 friends. My grandpa's in the audience from China. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak English, so this will be a fun speech for him to hear. I also have some former teachers in the audience. My former band director, Dr. Stewart, my former principal and vice principal, Coach Bass and Dr. Davison. Yeah, thank you. Such great mentors for me. Talking to them, it felt like nothing had really changed, and I felt like I had lost more hair than they did, honestly. And finally, thank you to Brian, Amber, and all of the Whisper staff for making this incredible event happen. Let's give them a round of applause. Every time Brian calls me to come back and talk, I'm like, Brian, please let me graduate. I'm getting too old to talk to high schoolers. But I come back here and I'm very humbled because I feel like I'm the youngest one here now. So I feel like y'all can teach me a lot more than I can say anything insightful. But Brian asked me today to talk about my story of why I joined Whisper and talk about the issue of social isolation and loneliness, which has already been introduced to you guys, and why I think that is one of the greatest issues students are facing today. So I thought the best way to do that and the structure of this talk can really be divided into 3 parts. First, social isolation is universal. Second, social isolation is a real problem and it's hurting our students, and our students are craving for a solution. And third, Whisper is the only organization out there who is recognizing the problem and doing something about it, and it's teaching our students to be long-term changers in their community. So let's start with the first point. I first heard about Whisper in 2018. I had a mentor, Andrew Hama, who spoke here 2 years ago, and another great mentor of mine. And he was like, Henry, you gotta come to this event, like we're just gonna be talking. And I'm like, no way, Jose, like I'm not coming to that. Unfortunately, there was pizza and Chick-fil-A, so I still came. And at the meeting, it didn't really quite click for me in the moments. And it wasn't until 2 years later when I was a senior at Lambert High School when it finally clicked. And the moment it happened was when I was sitting in my car. This was after taking AP exams. I thought I did decently well. I think Harvard agrees. And I remember coming back to my car and just feeling this incredible sense of loneliness in my stomach. And it was a weird feeling because I'd done well in my exams. I dapped up all my friends leaving the school. But why was I feeling that way? And it didn't make sense. Like, I had friends. I was class president. I was homecoming court. There's no way I would be lonely, right? But the litmus test I asked myself was, if my car broke down in the middle of the road at night, and for some reason I couldn't call my parents, who would I call? And the fact that no one's name immediately came to mind just scared me so much. And in fact, I'm not the only one who thinks this. 1 in 4 Americans report that they don't have someone that they can go to when they're going through a tough time. So I came to Whisper after that, and I kind of thought about that event, and I realized that how we are as people is kind of akin to The Truman Show. Raise of hands if you've seen The Truman Show before. Okay, about half of us. So for those of you who haven't seen it, Truman, played by Jim Carrey, is the center of this TV show, and he's the only one that doesn't realize it's a TV show. Everyone else is an actor, and he's the only one. He's kind of like a simulation, essentially. And he goes through his days, and he has a ton of friends. He has a lovely girlfriend. But for some reason, he just feels this sense of, again, this emptiness, that something is not quite right. And he eventually realizes, dang, everyone around me is actually an actor. And he kind of makes this statement that being part of a herd is not the same as being part of a community. And while it ends well for Truman because he realizes and gets out of the show, That situation is so many students' everyday lives, but we just don't realize it. I'll give you an example of this. My senior year, we went to every single undergraduate literature class to talk about Whisper. And the first question I would always ask students is, raise your hand if you can name every student in this class. Do you know how many students raise their hands on average? 2. Not completely none. But then we would ask these students to actually name name the other students. And majority of them wouldn't get it, and there would always be some awkward interaction where they're like, "You're Sally, right?" And no, it's Julia. But what was crazy was that we came to these classrooms in March and April, after these students had already been in those classrooms for 4, 5, 6 months at that point, and they still didn't know every other student's name in that classroom of maybe like 15 to 20 students. And what this tells me is that our students go through every day of school, sometimes without having a single meaningful interactions, sometimes without talking to someone new, and our students try so hard to not be seen. We know these students. They're the ones who sit by themselves in the cafeteria. They're the ones who put on a hood and sit in the back corner of the classroom trying not to be seen. Social isolation is everywhere. It does not discriminate. Even if you're captain of the football team or class president, and my hypothesis is those with more friends are actually even more lonely on the inside because they're trying to cover up for the emptiness. Point number 2, loneliness is a real problem, and it's hurting our students right now. In the longest ever longitudinal study on human happiness, a group of researchers at Harvard University, alma mater soon, looked at 724 men and young women over 75 years of their life to track what differentiated people from living longer and being happier than others. And what they found was that the number one determinant was how socially connected they were. They found that people who were more socially connected tended to be happier, physically healthier, and live longer. On the other hand, they found that social isolation had the same effect on the human body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, same effect as being an alcoholic, and twice as harmful as being obese. These are crazy stats, and I thought maybe there's some correlation instead of causation there. But further research shows that our body's metabolisms and at the cellular level actually starts to slow down within people who are socially isolated. Let's zoom back a little bit and look at the macro level. Today, the annual happiness index came out. That ranked every country in the world on a happiness scale, on a bunch of different factors, from GDP per capita to how many times you got a meal with people, to how many times you smoke, etc. Guess where the US ranked? Not 1, not 10, 24th in the world. And that's a big fall from where we were in 2012. We were ranked 12th back then. I want to zoom in on a country that is happy. Well, top 3 are Finland, Denmark, all the Scandinavian countries, but that's because they have free healthcare. That's a different reason. I want to focus on Ireland for a second, this tiny country north of the UK. At Harvard, there's a happiness class, and there was a case study on why people in Ireland are happy. And the reason is because of their pubs. This is not an excuse to start drinking. But the reason why, and research backs this up, why people in Ireland who go to pubs are happier is because pubs are a form of, it's a communal living room. It's a place for people to come with their friends, talk shop, or you can go there and meet new people. But the idea is that you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, you're making new connections or furthering or strengthening your existing ones. And the idea is that face-to-face interactions create social cohesion. Notice that's face-to-face, not social media. My 13-year-old sister told me the other day that at a school party, all the students were talking to each other, not in person, but via texting, while they were in the same room. Like, that blows my mind. But I think that is the reality that we are at right now. And it's not social media that creates happiness, but face-to-face interactions. Our students today are becoming way more successful than they have ever been before. We have more students today who are interning at Fortune 500 companies earlier on, more students today who are doing university-level research as a high schooler, more students who are building AI and getting 1600s on their SATs. I could never do that. I only got a 1590, unfortunately. Just kidding. But on the other hand, our students are also more socially divided than they have ever been. Our students today believe that life is a zero-sum game, that in order for me to succeed, someone else needs to fail. And that creates and breeds this competitiveness in the air. Because of that, what we see in Whisper, what we see around, is that there's this deep craving for social connections. And I'll give you 2 examples of this. After the undergraduate literature class visits, there was this freshman who came up to me and mentioned that he really wanted to come to one of our gatherings. And I was like, yeah, for sure, that'd be awesome. And he was like, unfortunately, I don't have a car, and it's after school. So I offered to pick him up, and he sends me his address, and I go to that location, and he comes running down the hill. And what he told me was that he didn't want his parents to know. So he had me park in the road behind his house so he'd come meet me. And when we dropped him, me and my friend, we dropped him off, he told us about if he didn't come tonight, there was a chance that he was going to hurt himself. And it was the connections and conversations, the first ones he had had in such a long time, that he was like, I have a new perspective on life, and I know now why I've been feeling the way I've been feeling. I'm not saying that Whisper is a suicide prevention organization, but what I can tell you is that at the most extreme forms of social loneliness, we get really bad results. And what we're advocating for in Whisper is not just a one-time change, but it's a fundamental change of people to change the way that they view others. It's change the way that they talk to others. And it's for them to lean into their community a little bit more. The other example of craving comes from this book by Bronnie Ware. She writes a book about the top 5 regrets of people who die. Her background is she was a nurse, and she was at the bedside of a lot of people who passed. And she wrote down an accumulation of notes that she observed. Top on the list was people saying that they regretted not staying in touch better with their friends. And alongside that was living a life true to their own instead of living a life that other people expected. But do you know the number 1 regret? It was not attending a Whisper gathering. No, I'm just kidding. All right, point number 3. Whisper is leading a fundamental revolution right now. Whisper, to my knowledge, is the only organization that is recognizing the problem and trying to do something about it. And Whisper is creating a whole new generation of leaders who, 1, recognize how important it is to foster actual relationships, and 2, are doing that in their actual communities. We saw the example of what Liam is doing down south. I also see this in my own personal life. It's been 5 years since I've been part of Whisper. And when I first joined, I thought I'd be giving to this organization, even when it didn't make sense to. I was a senior. My mom was pissed because I was doing college apps at the time. And she was like, what do you mean you're whispering? But now she's Whisper's biggest supporter. Yeah, thank you, Mom. But even though I thought I'd be giving back, I actually gained so much for being part of this organization. And I realized this when I came to Harvard. When I stepped foot on college, I realized it's the exact same problem. Same song, different tune. If anything, college students are even worse because they're more individualistic and they're better at covering up what they're feeling inside. But Whisper taught me that I don't need to be reactionary to my community, that I could be proactive about building a community around me, and that I have the agency, ability, and autonomy to do that. So some small examples of what I do. One, I think memorizing people's names is really important. I really suck at it. But I make an intention to memorize every dining hall worker at Harvard, their names. I have them I have a notes app on my phone to help me do that. Two, me and my friends, we have a weekly dinner where one of us will cook for everyone else, and I make everyone share a rose, a bud, and a thorn, something that's gone well this past week, something that's gone not well, and something you're looking forward to. They were resistant at first, but the Whisper impact broke through. And the final thing I do is I just play something called a question game. Every time I say it, everyone thinks it's like some crazy game, some ad-libs, and I'm like, no, I just ask you a question, and then you answer, and then you ask me a question. Favorite game ever. But when I came back from Harvard and I told people what I was coming back for, it usually takes a minute or two to explain. Every single person was like, that is amazing. We need that on this campus. And no one has ever told me what we're advocating for is ever a bad idea. So Brian, maybe we're bringing Whisper to Harvard next. Let me conclude. In psychology, every social movement is never started by the first person. It's always the second person who joins in that really gets other people going. It's with the second person that people realize that it's socially acceptable to join. Whisper has already lit the flame. We've already started the revolution. Now we're calling on everyone here to join and be the second person to join. Other countries around the world are already taking note of the problem of the epidemic of loneliness, as Scott put it. In England, they have a whole ministry of loneliness. In Japan, they have a minister of loneliness. America is so far behind right now, and we can only lean on Whisper to change that. And the beauty of Whisper is that we're a grassroots campaign. We don't need a government agency to tackle this problem. I mean, if we had a Department of Loneliness, Doge and Elon Musk would have definitely cut it by now. That's not the point. A wise man once told me that relationships aren't taught, they're caught. What we're advocating about today is not something you can learn about as like a history lesson. You have to experience a genuine, authentic relationship. And what Whisper encourages students to do is, as Coach Bass would say it, break down the barrier of coolness and be vulnerable first. The Whisper revolution has started, and we would love for you to join. Thank you guys very much.